Winter is here, changing the air typing from poison to frost damage and bringing with it a whole new batch of indie game demos courtesy of the Steam Next Fest. For those unfamiliar, the Steam Next Fest is a week-long, triannual virtual indie games festival hosted on Steam. It features hundreds of free indie game demos and even live streams led by their developers. As a lover of indie games myself, these showcases are always like a mini holiday for me, and I'm here today, albeit several weeks later than anticipated, to share some of my favorite finds with all of you, so that you will go out and give these poor, tired souls your money, or at the very least, your time. Now, there were far fewer spooky-themed games than I was expecting for an October showcase, unless you count horrifically poor optimization, in which case there was an unfortunately ample amount, but a good thing to keep in mind, as always, is that these are previews of games all in vastly different stages of development. Some are finishing up and may even be out by the time you're seeing this, while others have a lot of work ahead of them and will be slated for release sometime in the next year. Now, the order of this list doesn't necessarily matter, but I will be saving my favorite demos for the end. I'll be breaking this video up into chapters so that you can skip around to specific titles at your leisure, and I'll also throw a link to each game's Steam page down below that subscribe button so that you can check them out and wishlist them for yourselves. As we'll see later on in this list, I like real artsy games as much as the next lowercase g gamer, your Journeys and Death Strandings, games that really use the medium to try and say something. But sometimes, who needs it? You know, sometimes you just want to hand the controller over to that little id goblin living in the dark recesses of your mind and succumb to the chokehold that video games have such a unique capacity to secure on your attention span. I'm losing you. Fighters and Bullets is one such game. It's locked into that early 2010s XBLA mentality, which is to say that it's a barrage of colorful numbers and exploding zombies. And it plays admittedly very strongly into my nostalgia, being a child of Dead Ops Arcade and I made a game with zombies in it. What a time to be alive. Fighters and Bullets is a top-down action shooter where you essentially just try and survive against hordes of zombies. Players control a character that automatically attacks, making the gameplay focus more on positioning and build composition rather than attack timing and accuracy. Your goal is to upgrade your equipment and skills while dodging zombies to survive long enough to face and defeat the level's boss. What really defines it though is its absurdity in tone and style. Increasingly outlandish zombies will swarm you from every direction, and comical items like football helmets and burgers will buff and upgrade you just as often as high-grade military weaponry. Tonally, it doesn't do anything for me anymore, and I'm sure a lot of people will bounce off of it for that reason, nostalgia doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, but to its credit, mechanically, it's a scientifically engineered dopamine machine. Slot machine upgrades, damage numbers and experience orbs that change color as they increase in rarity and scale. Big attacks have screen shake, your experience bar has screen shake, the pause menu has screen shake. All it's missing is some substantial long-term progression and maybe co-op, and it's all over for me. Zero Sievert, on the other hand, is a top-down shooter of a very different breed, requiring a great deal of mechanical precision and patience. It's a wasteland survival scavenging game similar to titles like Stalker, wherein players must venture out into different wasteland zones to gather items and survive against the bandits, wildlife, and strange monsters that now roam there. Now, I really like this game's sort of cute pixel art aesthetic because of just how much it contrasts with its crushing difficulty. Semi-realism and combat challenge is the name of the game here, as players must manage health as well as status effects, bleeding, hunger, thirst, and radiation. Supply crafting and rationing is a fundamental component of the gameplay loop, especially since things like hunger, thirst, and health don't reset after each venture, and enemies can do a lot of damage very quickly. It may be easy to make a game difficult, but it's very hard to do so in a way that feels fair to the player, and Zero Sievert toes that line closely, which, thankfully, from what I can tell, is pretty true to the genre. Mechanics like only being able to see what's in your cone of vision and having improved accuracy when placing your cursor directly on a target instead of in their general direction are really good at rewarding players' patience and precision. But at the same time, it means they have to rely more on audio cues that aren't precise since it's not a 3D space, and automatic weapons like the first loadout's AK-47 are almost impossible to use at long distances and in the heat of combat, where multiple enemies are scattering and you can only hit what you can track with the mouse. Enemies, of course, don't have to deal with mouse and keyboard controls to beam you the second they spot you, so playing fast and loud really doesn't work. Thankfully, playing cautiously does, as using stealth and long-ranged weapons to pick off unsuspecting enemies and sneaking past groups to more tactfully choose your battles feels more reliable and more rewarding. Once I understood how the game actually wanted me to play it, I became more excited to explore the depths of its many systems, from gun crafting to cooking, and also to explore its many zones to see what weird and terrible things lurk within them. Zero Sievert is a beautiful and mechanically very tight-feeling shooter, and while it definitely has a steep learning curve, for those survival sim-loving masochists, I'm sure that serves only as more praise. If you've ever lost entire days in the blink of an eye playing Factorio or Satisfactory or other like factory simulation games, then you should probably stay pretty far away from Techtonica because, whoo boy. I feel like this could be an entire discussion in itself, but if you're not familiar, Techtonica is another entry in the factory simulation / resource automation management genre, which sounds so dry, but is honestly not that much different at its core from something like Biters and Bullets. Only where that experience is built on you turning your brain off when the flashing lights come on, this one is more turning your brain on cruise control as you manage collecting resources and crafting increasingly complex items, meticulously engineering exactly how to build and arrange your autonomous crafters so that you can climb the tech tree and ultimately make the numbers go up faster forever. It's played in the first person and has much more focus on story and blueprint discovery through exploration than its contemporaries, in a way somewhat reminiscent of Subnautica. Unfortunately, the frame consistency and optimization is also more reminiscent of Subnautica. It's not game-breaking or anything, though it does take a bit to get used to the somewhat flat textures, dull colors, and less than consistent frame rates. But I can somewhat confidently say that what Techtonica lacks in its visual appeal, it more than makes up for in its design. It's safe to say that Techtonica wears its inspirations on its sleeve, but it's also able to distinguish itself by the way it combines different gameplay elements to make a fairly cohesive management experience packaged alongside its own narrative and progression. There's an AI companion named Sparks that is surprisingly well written and voice acted, who guides the player through remnants of an abandoned underground factory and cave system, encouraging exploration that rewards the player with both narrative information and construction blueprints.
We did everything our own way, but whatever they needed for the expedition, we found. People leave you alone when you get results. Those were good times.
From what I could see in the demo, the factory elements and tech tree feel fairly expansive, with a mix of new and better forms of factory automation as well as player improvements, like a sick terraforming gun that would not look out of place in City 17. There's definitely some weirdness, like not being able to run a conveyor straight from one machine to another, despite there being several small doors modeled on each machine, and the 3D space only compounding this issue, making vertical placement kinda weird, IMHO. There was even one ore vein I couldn't access because I couldn't place a drill on the same level as my conveyor belt and inserters, but I'm somewhat lenient on these aspects because I'm hopeful that they can be changed, if not kinda worked around fairly easily. I'm also just a glutton for factory sims, so I guess bias and such. The medieval city building / colony sim games that Manor Lords is looking to emulate have been around for a long time, and when I look at it, I see a lot of potential. And I know that's teacher speak for currently sucks ass, but I promise it's also good right now. It's a management game that gives you a handful of people and a plot of land and tells you that you can build a kingdom. But what makes it stand out is how it promises mechanical depth at several different scales. It starts at the micro, with individual families and even family members being available to assign to different tasks, like building, farming, or working a job site. It then moves up to mid-level resource and economy management, with building placement both zone and model-based, before finally moving up once more to the very much macro scale as the map zooms out, allowing you to see various territories surrounding you that you can eventually vie for control over through interacting with and competing against other AI leaders. At least that's what's promised, and it's kind of a lot. The game is a blend of a lot of different mechanics from across the genre. It's worker placement and city building and grand strategy, and while not everything was available in the demo, I'm kind of surprised by just how functional it all managed to be. The systems on the micro and mid scales both seem to work pretty fluidly together, with the balance of gathering resources, assigning workers, and building all feeling pretty reasonable. But the jury's still out on how the strategy elements will play out since that was not available in the demo. As for performance, however, it also was pretty good, looking consistently good even when zooming all the way into a weird third-person view, which I say weird, but it was honestly pretty cool. The game also looks and sounds good, pulling off a more realistic art style with decently detailed textures and I'll say decent animations. They're not setting the standard or anything, but it's nice to look at. Manor Lords is an incredibly ambitious project that promises a high caliber of medieval colony simulation at a pretty high quality. So far it's left me with a good impression, but I'm still holding myself to cautiously optimistic more than anything, despite its place on my wishlist and eventually my Steam library.
So you're looking a job, eh? Let me tell you what you're getting yourself into.
A narrative-driven resource management game that just breathes atmosphere and tone, The Pale Beyond delivers a compelling mystery tale told with stunning visuals, sound, and story. As the first mate of the Temperance, a ship sailing into the ice sheets on a dangerous expedition, players must work under the leadership of a hardy captain with a checkered past, and for the pay of a mysterious benefactor to keep the crew on course and alive as they attempt to rescue a ship that mysteriously went missing long ago. It feels a bit like Frostpunk in both gameplay and atmosphere, though it's much more character and narrative driven, and from what I can tell is not nearly as systems heavy. The Pale Beyond does a great job of establishing and defining characters in a way that feels very well paced and natural, as you slowly meet more of your crew and learn about their loyalties and beliefs as your journey progresses. Loyalties are something you'll have to learn to manage, as each crew member has a loyalty specific to a different section leader. Sailors, for instance, are loyal to your captain, while scouts to the navigator. It's a fairly clever system that makes having a larger crew both easier to manage and somewhat more believable. You can have groups of crew members with distinct personalities that still share a common loyalty as far as gameplay is concerned. It's not a crazy new or revolutionary system by any means, but being able to feel your choices reverberate out through different crew interactions is still very rewarding. The beauty of the system really comes out as time goes on, when difficult decisions will need to be made and there's no one way to please everyone, leading to choices that have increasingly more dire and long-standing consequences for the dynamic of your crew. The portion that I managed to play in the demo felt very well paced and looked absolutely gorgeous, but what stood out to me the most as far as presentation goes has to be the soundtrack. There's a diverse range of music tracks that did a lot to set the tone and build the ship's atmosphere, from grand orchestral sweeps when first setting sail to intimate and somber piano melodies that play when hardship strikes. But there is one instrument that plays a very pivotal diegetic role, and that is the accordion. I was lucky enough to catch a bit of the devs livestream where they discussed how they use the instrument's unique timbre and range, and it instantly sold me.
So this is the kind of space that I love.
Yeah.
With the accordion. Because it can be so weird.
Yeah.
Like... What? It's that full spectrum thing of it just being able to cover all of the bases.
Yeah.
You know, like I'd quite happily listen to, and have spent a considerable amount of time actually on this project listening to just solo accordion.
Like all the other games that already released on this list, I'd still like to discuss Potionomics since it was a standout demo that I played, and I already wrote this bit. But I will keep it brief since the game has launched and there are actual reviews out there that can give a much better idea of what the full game is really like. Anyway, Potionomics is a potion crafting / store management game with deck building and dating sim elements, which, when all mixed together, makes for an incredibly cool concoction. Crafting potions is a pretty straightforward system of experimenting with different ingredient types to find the ratios of magical components that work best. Then to house and sell more potions, you have to work to upgrade and customize your rundown shop with both stylistic and statistical improvements. Actually selling the potions, though, is where the mechanics get really creative, as transactions play out in a sort of card battle or bartering minigame. You slowly build a deck of cards that you'll use to quote-unquote combat customers by raising your potion prices before they lose their patience. It's not quite as high stakes as other deck builders, as you can essentially close the deal with the current price at any time, but it's an interesting take on gamifying conversation, something that has historically seen some interesting interpretations. This system also allows every customer to feel very unique beyond just their design and dialogue, since their personalities will come out in their bartering stats. Friendly customers may give you several turns to play cards and freely raise the prices, whereas more confident or stubborn customers may work against you and drain patience quickly. Not to mention that building relationships with these townsfolk adds unique cards to your collection, meaning that your character can actually choose to learn from people around them, and that knowledge is represented as a tangible advantage for future barters, which is just incredibly cool in and of itself. From the characters to the style and animations, this game just radiates charm, and I think it's going to be a very solid hit. And I can say that because it came out already, and it is. Wildfrost is a deck-building roguelike, a strategy card game built around replayability, planning, and adaptation. You start with one of 3 randomized leader cards and must slowly add to and upgrade a deck of cards representing fighters and their actions, so you can survive a series of combat encounters and defeat a boss at the end of them. Now when it comes to card games, I know I'm pretty far from an expert on determining things like balance, probability, fun, especially when I only have a limited amount of time to spend with a game, and I kinda suck at card games. If you've played a roguelike deck builder or even a card battler in general, you'll probably find something in this game that feels familiar. It's a little bit Magic Commander, it's a little bit Slay the Spire. Okay, it's a lot of it Slay the Spire. It's a game that wears its inspirations on its sleeve, but it isn't afraid to implement its own style and mechanical changes to make something a bit more unique. And to its credit, I think it does so very successfully. For a roguelike, Wildfrost brings a good mix of short and long-term progression. Most of your progress will be earned and lost during any given run, but it also offers carryover progression in the form of a town system that makes new cards available for future runs as a reward for completing certain objectives in past ones. There's also a leader mechanic, where every run starts with the choice choice between 3 randomized leader cards that'll be the baseline of your deck. If they die, your run ends, and since they're often your strongest card and have the most polarizing ability, you'll have to build your deck to synergize around them if you want to maximize your effectiveness. And you'll need that effectiveness because this game is unforgiving. You won't make it very far without some foresight and strategic planning. For instance, if you pick a ranged leader, you'll need to pick up a frontline companion to block for them, since positioning matters for how damage is dealt, and they won't last very long on their own. If you choose a tanky frontline leader that can only attack when they take damage, you'll need to look for more sustain, and you may want to look for a card upgrade that adds bonus attack damage whenever that character loses health. There are a lot of options for how to build your deck every run, and since all of them are randomized and only some of them are helpful to you at any given time, it makes use of the most iconic mechanic that perfectly intersects deck builders and roguelikes alike: gambling. Wildfrost is an incredibly well-polished game with a fun and addictive gameplay loop, great music and art design, and feels mostly balanced, if not just really challenging. Though I will say it was fairly hard for me to build a reliable synergy before the first main boss without getting incredibly lucky.
I just performed a ritual with my mom. The moment has passed, but I'll record it in these pages for you, for the future.
Season is a game that I played for less than an hour and found impactful in a way few games attempt and even fewer games actually achieve. It's a slow-paced, narrative-heavy adventure game wherein players must walk and bicycle through a world where an impending cataclysmic event is said to be coming to destroy everything. It's the player's job to record and photograph the different artifacts and moments of the world and the people who inhabit it, decorating their journal with these memories as they do so. They take on the role of a sort of record keeper in this way, seemingly not in any official capacity, but driven more by a personal duty felt by the protagonist. Much of the gameplay consists of actually traveling through these environments, capturing photos and audio recordings of cultural touchstones, and decorating a journal with photos, stickers, and phrases inspired by them. It's in this way that Season is the very definition of a game about the journey and not necessarily the destination. It's asking players to meet it halfway, if not further. You have to be willing to stop and take in your surroundings, to be willing to give yourself over to the world that Scavenger Studios has created, to want to line up careful photographs, and want to listen to the stories behind the artifacts that they capture, because if you don't, then there's really nothing here for you to engage with. It's a very beautiful game, and admittedly the motif of a sheltered protagonist's unexpected journey through a doomed world just for the sake of experiencing it got me hooked incredibly quickly. There are no flashy cinematics, there's no meticulously crafted gameplay loop. Immersion is not a byproduct here, it's a requirement. Most of the things it does have, like pretty graphics, well-designed soundscapes, and satisfying traversal, are all just a means to an end. They're pleasant to engage with and of course show a great deal of talent on the part of the developers, but they're just adding to the comfort of the audience who are there to listen to a story. And thankfully, this looks to be a story worth hearing. What I saw in the demo was very captivating, with narratives being built out as I interacted with different landmarks to reveal a more complete picture of the history of each location the longer I stopped to observe. There are intimate moments that are truly meditative and careful moments that are thought-provoking, and awe-inspiring moments that would capture beautifully just as a painting. It's okay that this kind of game won't be for everyone, because I genuinely think that this game is going to have a significant impact on the people it is able to reach. Dredge is a narrative-heavy fishing simulation game, but like the subject matter it's pulling from, it gets only more complex and interesting the closer you look at it. It's easily defined by exploration and minigame mechanics, but it's really driven by its atmosphere and haunting narrative mystery. It's incredibly good, and incredibly deserving of a spoiler warning. Not for any specific plot beats or reveals, but more for the game itself. Like many games, so much of this title is experiential, and I genuinely think it'll be more enjoyable the less you know going in. That being said, this is the finale of a highlight list video, so most of your time playing Dredge will be spent out on the water, exploring the area and visiting different fishing pools, playing a sort of short timing minigame to catch various types of sea life that can be sold to local fishmongers. With the money you make doing this, you can upgrade your boat and your gear, so long as you don't have any outstanding debts to pay. And really, as far as gameplay, that's kind of it. Now I know that might not sound like a lot, but what makes the experience so noteworthy is its ability to be really fucking creepy. It nails the essence of cosmic horror better than most. Quote unquote, what lurks below is really the through line for Dredge's theme and presentation, as there's no better setting to explore the fear of the unknown than the ocean. There are unnatural things that roam in the depths just out of view. There are deep buried mysteries between the townspeople and the sea that you'll discover as you haul in horribly deformed fish or artifacts, and the locals, they don't seem surprised. They just tell you that when you find more, and you will, you need to bring it to them. There are secrets out on these waters, and piece by piece you'll slowly start to uncover them, even if that means losing a bit of yourself in the process. God, okay, I feel like I'm writing a fanfiction here. I am a huge cosmic horror nerd, so I'm more than a bit biased when it comes to this type of storytelling, especially when it's packaged with such phenomenal audio and visual design. The world of Dredge is made up of unassuming polygons and a palette of muted pastels, where daylight is dull and sunsets become a moment of picturesque beauty before nightfall moves in, darkening the sky and shrouding the waters in fog, leaving visible only the bright lights and the vibrant eyes of predatory creatures lurking below. As you spend more time in the darkness, you become panicked, and the line between what's real and what's imagined becomes blurred as phantom ships and false rocks phase in and out of existence and giant sea monsters surface to take chunks out of your boat. But this feeling of dread doesn't necessarily go away once you're back in the daylight. The deep gurgles heard when fishing or dredging for salvage are deep and animalistic. The piano chime that plays to signal a successful catch becomes detuned when an aberration is hauled into your cargo bay. It toes the line so well between unsettling mystery and impressive horror, I simply cannot wait to play more of it. Dredge offers a pretty fishing sim with a simple but enjoyable gameplay loop, but as progressively more aberrant things come to surface and the mystery of these towns and these people begins to unfold, its narrative and atmosphere are what really make it stand out as a truly horrific and compelling experience. And it's an instant wishlist for me. And that about wraps it up on my end. Thank you folks so much for sticking around to this point. It truly means a lot to me, just as I'm sure any time or interest you dedicate to these games means the world to their developers. The next Fest is scheduled to start around February 6th of 2023, so mark your calendars and prepare for a week of indie games fun. You can expect a video from me covering the showcase 2 to 14 weeks following it? Who knows? Thanks again. Later, y'all.